arguably the first real supergroup. Yes, I see you looking at me, Cream. Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young attained vocal harmony perfection on Deja Vu. Stay with us.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff. And Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. Another great episode of music goodness. We try and alternate it, give you a little music, give you a little movies, right, Eric? And I think we attain a happy balance.
We do indeed. Yeah.
We're like the food pyramid of podcasts. We give you the right amount of portions of everything. I just came up with that. Eric thinks I write a lot of this stuff. 99% of the stuff that comes out of my mouth is not scripted. There's very little that comes out. So the food pyramid just came to me as I was saying, I'm like, we're like the food pyramid of podcasting. I like that. That could be on a shirt. I think we could make a shirt, the food pyramid of podcasts. And you have like the movie portion, the top 5 portion, and then the music portion. I'm going to do that. What do you think?
Pyramid scheme.
Works for me.
No, not a pyramid scheme, but the food pyramid. A pyramid scheme is something different. We would make out like bandits and then we'd haul ass out of here. With everybody's money. But we're not here to do that. We're here every week to talk about music and movies and the stuff that shaped our lives and the stuff we have fun talking about. So Eric is here, a little under the weather, but that's okay. We're not going to do any 3-part harmonies. I think we decided before the show that we'll spare everybody any attempts. Even if Eric was at full throat, he would be the best, probably best equipped to lead us in some 3-part harmonies. But in a weird way, I'm kind of thankful he's got a little sore throat, because then we're not even going to be tempted to go there.
Yeah.
Unless he wants to be the lower end. He wants to be like the low end.
Yeah, so, the frog in the throat.
There you go.
Yeah, that guy, the bass.
Sound like Lou Rawls. And we've got a guest here. I think he is setting a record with this appearance. I think this is the quickest second appearance or quickest time between 2 appearances for a guest, and it's Mr. Rob Distefano.
Wow.
Welcome aboard.
Sir. Yep.
He was just on our Hackney Diamonds episode. That was like just over a month ago, and he's back already. I think that is the quickest return trip or cycle around the sun that a guest has made before they've returned.
I appreciate the return call. I'm happy to be here.
How was the trip around the sun? Was it good? Because you're back very quickly. He came back. So welcome aboard, Rob.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here. We had a blast on our last episode that Rob was on, and of course I mainly invite him just so I can look at all the guitars behind him. I kind of don't pay attention to what he's saying because I'm too busy looking at the guitar necks and see if I can read what they are. I think there's like a guild back there, and
there is, yes.
Yeah. See,
a Telly, an Ibanez, yep,
and then
there's even got a bass.
And there's one that's turned with its back towards us. Is that one being punished because it's not facing us?
No, that's just the way. That's my Ibanez.
Okay, that's okay. Don't be ashamed of an Ibanez. You can face it forward with a Fender. It's fine. It's all good. So thank you, Rob, for joining us for this album, Deja Vu from Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I'll make a confession after we do the stats. So it'll be a confessional time. This was released in March of 1970, produced by Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. There were 4 singles released from this album. Woodstock went to number 11. Teach Your Children went to number 16. Our House went to number 30. And then the song Carry On was a B-side of Teach Your Children, but it did receive radio airplay. So it was given some airtime. It went to number 1 on the Billboard charts, 7 times platinum. We don't really, Eric, when we do albums, they're usually like 10 or 11 or 5. We never get one in between. 7's kind of a interesting, usually it's like a 5 times platinum, a 2 times platinum, or a 10 and above.
I thought it was 8. Didn't it go 8?
Maybe it's got even further than, yeah. I mean,
yeah, I thought I read that somewhere.
Yeah, but even so, you know what? They don't update Wikipedia as often as they should, or, we got to, it is crowdsourced, so we got to go with the information we have. And they were 1997 Hall of Fame inductees as Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Yeah. Without the young. And then the interesting thing about their induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is that all of them had been inducted previously. So they were the first group that had all been inducted separately. Stills with Buffalo Springfield, Nash with Hollies, and Crosby with the Byrds. And then they all got in, but oddly enough, no Neil Young.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, kind of strange that it was CSN and then not CSNY. But then again, Neil Young got in. If it was Buffalo Springfield, he was part of Buffalo Springfield, so he got in with Buffalo Springfield, and then probably on his own.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah, he got in the same year that Led Zeppelin got in.
Ah, that's why you remember that.
Because they jammed together. I remember that.
and Joni Mitchell got in 97. She got in the same year as Crosby, Stills, and Nash. So. Rob, you were excited to do this album. Why did you pony up to the bar and say, yeah?
I've always been a Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young fan. I'm a big Neil Young fan. I've seen him in concert and everything. I've actually seen Crosby, Stills, and Nash in concert too. Their songs have always hit home with me. I like the harmonies, the acoustics, the acoustic guitar and everything. It's just their songs. They have a good range of songs on their albums, and especially Deja Vu. Mm-hmm. It hits a lot of different notes along the way there. And
literally,
yeah. And it's a great album to listen to front and back, all the way through. And you never at a loss with that one.
Yeah, it's a bit of perfection, I think. Close to it, I would say. But yeah.
You guys ready for my confession?
Yes.
I had never listened to the album.
I knew you never were.
Until this episode. Until we decided to do this episode. I always, everybody loves Crosby, Stills, and it's very easy. Their hits are very easy to listen to, and they've been a staple of rock music. But never kind of really delved too deep. I know the history of them. I know all the players. You know the story, the fights, and the tumultuousness. But never had really gotten into it. But there was always something about Deja Vu. I'm like, that's probably an album that I need to educate myself on. And that's what this show is about. It's not just about those ones that we know, the slam dunks. But this is a slam dunk. But it wasn't for me. But Eric, I agree with you. This is like a perfect album. I know
you were never a fan of David Crosby. I know that growing up.
Yeah, he was my least favorite of the group.
So I was quite surprised actually when you put it out there. Let's do the I'm kind of perplexed by it, but I was like, okay. Yeah, but it's a great record. I never actually had it. But yeah, it's a good listen. I had the greatest hits. The good one. So far
was like the first one.
No, that was the one that came out in 2005, I believe.
Yeah.
It had all the later stuff on there too, like Southern Cross, which I love. And it was a nice range of their. They didn't just have hits. It was just there was some deep cuts on there as well, and it was a nice package. So that's the one that I know well.
Yep.
But to listen to an album this could be almost a greatest hits in itself, right? I mean, there's just so many good songs on here. Yeah, it's
damn straight. I mean, wow, I really was. It's easy. This is an easy listen, first of all, because it's 36 minutes, so it is a quick album. And you've got certified classic rock hits, right? You've got Teach Your Children, Woodstock, Our House, and then to a lesser extent, Helpless, which is a radio, a Neil Young hit, and Carry On. And Deja Vu, I think, has even been played on classic rock radio. So, when I put this on, I was, okay, yeah, it's like, all right, yeah, the first side, pretty much familiar with most of it. I'm like, this is going to be great, It was actually the stuff that I wasn't familiar with that I really was like, wow, like it filled in.
Mm-hmm.
It filled in the gaps for me that really, I was literally, this album blew me away. I was blown away by this album. I couldn't believe that I was, sitting on this and not even ever just giving it like a cursory listen, just a bypass listen. So,
yeah.
Pretty wild. So, you know what, and that's, we've always said that. We've said that since episode 1, Eric and I, new music is new if you've never heard it before. Doesn't matter when it's come out. If you've never heard it before, it's new music to you. That's the beauty of going back. And that's the beauty of what we do. And what we try and do is advocate for some stuff that people may not have ever heard, or myself educating myself and now adding this gem to music I like to listen to, which is pretty wild.
Yeah. Do you have it?
No, I don't. I've always, well, here's the thing. I've always been, like, in record stores, it's something I always want to pick up, but I've never found a copy that was in good shape. You can get it for dirt cheap, but they're always like ragged, ratty copies. So I want to get like a nice copy of it, so, and now more than ever, yeah, it's definitely on my radar to pick up because
I'm a big, I'm a big fan of like re-release, the legacy editions. And this is a really nice package too. A lot of demos, a lot of alternate takes, stuff that you never heard before. It's really worth your time. But yeah, it's just one of those staple albums that I wish that I had back in the day. I knew the songs, but I just didn't, like you say, there's several songs on this thing that you didn't really think that a band like this could be so hard edged. I mean, there's some really rough edges to this record. You
tend to think of them as like as like a glorified barbershop quartet, right? I mean, that's, like kind of, that was their rep, like Our House and some of those songs are kind of simple sounding, but when you, like Eric just said, you go deeper on this album, there's some hard rock textures going on here, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, the harmonies, the hard songs, like Almost Cut My Hair.
Yeah.
That's a real good rocker right there. I like that one.
That's a great. Somebody mentioned that I think it was Stephen Stills was very critical of the song, and he said, "I don't like your vocal on it." I think it's amazing. What are you talking about, David Crosby's vocal? You're not used to hearing him so strong.
Yeah, to really wail. Yeah,
and to later on in years, of course, the indulgences, the drugs. I mean, that took its toll. But his voice tended to be very soft, very high. But here, man, he's really, it's coming from inside, like the gut. It's just, I've never heard, somebody belt that out. Because of such a soft voice, it's amazing that you could pitch like that. Every once in a while it surprises you. So it's amazing.
Yeah. And it's like a true hippie anthem.
Yeah.
Let your freak flag fly, and just a lot of, I mean, the song really isn't about anything, but literally he almost cut his hair, and why he didn't, or why he almost did. It's like the simplest thing, but like Eric said, the vocal performance, it's so intense, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what it is for Crosby. Like you said, it's kind of an intense vocal for him, really, or like an urgent style vocal. It almost sounds like it's a live track when I listen to it, because it sounds very different. It sounds like that, it doesn't sound like this was a take of him singing. This was almost like a live. It felt like a live take. Just even the way it was produced, there's a little bit of echo, a little bit of reverb in it, and it almost sounds like it was just like a live thing.
If I'm not mistaken, I think they did that song in one take.
Yeah.
I think that's
I wouldn't be surprised. There's really lightning in a bottle. Before we go any further, I'm going to ask Rob, and then we'll get to Eric. I said in the open that CSN and Y, or whichever amount of initials you want to ascribe to them, were the first real supergroup. And I thought about it, and yeah, people are going to go to Cream. Now, Rob, what do you think?
The reason why I wouldn't choose Cream, I think, is I think CSN came from more popular groups that were more well known when they came together. Like, people knew who they were when they came together. I don't know if everybody knew who Jack Bruce. I mean, maybe, but the bands they came from, like maybe John Mayall, they were coming from. But
yeah,
I think Crosby, Stills, and Nash came from like sort of more
prestigious groups.
Prestigious group, right? That's the right word. Yeah, than the other guys did.
All right, let me kick it over to Eric, because he's a Clapton fan. So I don't know if he's going to be have a little bias towards his man, or how do you feel about it?
I really don't have any, because I think, like Eric Clapton would say, he would say that the supergroups are. He doesn't believe in a supergroup. It's just an overrated thing.
Coming from the guy that was in like 4 of them. Or 3 of them.
But he saw Cream as a power trio, like that kind of thing, and he didn't really think much of the supergroup. Blind Faith didn't work out because he didn't want it to be that with Steve Winwood. So yeah. I mean, I could understand, CS and why it's like, amazing. These guys are together. So yeah, I would say that I would agree. You could argue that they are the first, super group that most people probably did gravitate towards, because they were so used to what they were doing at their other bands, so especially like Neil Young. I mean, you think about what he's done, what he would go on to do. The guy is like, wears many hats. I mean, he's so many different styles, and it's just, and to be in a group like this where it's, a little bit more tame, a little bit more reserved. He's the godfather of grunge, for God's sake.
Grunge,
I mean, So I mean, he he would go on to do those harder edge things, but but like we said, like we pointed out, these harder edge songs are there. There's not by him necessarily.
Yeah, oddly enough. Rob, you hit it right on the head. That was my point exactly. Is that Cream? I looked at where Ginger Baker came from and and they were kind of obscure bands. Maybe not in their home country of England, but for the most part, they were obscure. And then Eric hit it right, because it's, all these guys came from known entities. The Byrds were a big band. The Hollies were a big band. Buffalo Springfield was probably the least known, but they still were pretty big in the California scene. So yeah, the coming together of these three of members from these 3 bands kind of is the definition of a supergroup. I think it's kind of like, back then they just thought, we sing really well together, and that was really the impetus for it. But
I think that the thing that separated Crosby, Stills, and Nash from other bands like Cream and stuff like that is the individual members sort of kept their identities. Mm-hmm. They weren't really like, they didn't really. It was sort of like 3 solo artists working together as opposed to creating a band. And in fact, I read that that's why they named themselves Crosby, Stills, and Nash, because they didn't want to have like a band identity. They wanted to keep their individuality in there.
That's interesting. Yeah. So their first album comes out in 1969, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and it's got some good stuff on there, Marrakesh Express and a couple of other songs. But Stephen Stills was kind of like, if we're going to go out and tour, we kind of need somebody to play keyboards. We kind of need an extra person. And they originally were going to approach Steve Winwood, but he was in the middle of Blind Faith. So then the idea came, well, why don't we get Neil Young? He can play, even though he's a guitarist, he can play keyboards. He can kind of do those things. And Nash was a little, had some reservations. He didn't really know him. Stephen Stills, even though they were in Buffalo Springfield, was kind of like, all right, we could do that. And then they approached Neil Young, and he's like, well, if I do this, it's not going to be as a sideman. you're going to make me a full you're going to make me a full member. So I'm not going to be like I'm not going to be like a touring guitarist or keyboard player, whatever you need. You got to make me a full member. So that's where it became from Crosby, Stills, and Nash to Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young for a very short time. I mean, these guys just fought. God, they would probably put the Who to shame with the bickering. I mean, all these, Eric, we seem to like latch onto these guys that just can't get together. They can't have a conversation. Or
that's because they're all of equal talent. So it's hard to is like Eagles. I mean, it's like there's so many Chiefs, and the way this band was structured, like Rob pointed out, it was, they each came with a song and that was theirs. I mean, sometimes I think it was either Stephen Stills or Neil Young would take his song and work on it by himself.
That would be Neil Young.
And then he would just add their vocals to it, and that was. There's several, artists that we've talked about that do that, who we're talking about there. But I mean, this isn't your traditional democracy, band democracy. It's very much for distinct individuals that just happen to make some great music together. And of course there's going to be those clashes, Yeah,
so. That's what brought them together. You're absolutely right. Neil Young was the one that would bring in his material pretty much finished, and then they would add the vocals. The other three, it was a little more collaborative because that was kind of the spirit of it. It seems to me, from what I've read, that Stephen Stills was kind of the Jeff Lynne of Crosby, Stills, and Nash. He played bass, he played keyboards, like he was playing lead electric. He would do everything as far as instrumentation goes. Nash and Crosby would play a little bit of some acoustic guitar. But Stephen Stills was really kind of the architect, playing all the other instruments except there was a bass player that they had, but he would play bass when needed. And of course, they had a drummer, Dallas Taylor, as well.
Yeah.
If I had to pick my favorite member of the band, it would be Stephen Stills.
Yeah,
his songs, hit me the most. I like his musicianship. He's a great guitarist.
Yeah.
Writes great lyrics. He's
definitely got the strongest presence. I mean,
and he's crazy, and he's crazy in the head too.
Yeah, I think
he's just like
literally. I think he fancied himself the leader. Yeah, like you say, the leader of the band. And I watched a documentary. I think it was about them, or it might have been just about David Crosby. And I remember seeing like there was one instance where him and Crosby were he was tearing into Crosby big time. Crosby's lying there in a hammock and he's just stoned out of his mind, and Stills is just freaking just letting him have it. Like, you are, disgrace and blah, blah, blah. It's like, wow. And this was a little bit later on too. This wasn't the early days. This was probably closer to like the album they did in like 82, like that with Southern Cross on it. And, I mean, Crosby was always, I guess he was just that unreliable.
Yeah.
Or because of he's always, in and out. I mean, he's always had so many problems personally and of course his drug use,
really the epitome of the rock and roll lifestyle. Yeah. And in jail.
Yeah. In and out.
Liver transplant. I mean, the guy, when they did, we're going to get to Deja Vu, but just to talk about the 80s when Neil Young was open to the idea of reuniting. He goes, I'll reunite only if Crosby gets himself straightened out. Like, we're not like, I'm good for everything else. This is the deal breaker. And that's when Crosby was actually in jail at the time. So he was kind of forced to get clean.
Yeah.
And then when he got out, they put out that album, American Dream, I think in 89 or 90, whatever it was. One more bizarre piece of trivia, then we'll start talking about the album. Pop quiz. How many Crosby, Stills, and Nash albums came out in the 70s that were not a compilation or a live album? How many studio albums, as either Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young or Crosby, Stills, and Nash? How many studio albums came out that were not live or compilations?
It's 3, isn't it?
What's your guess, Eric?
I'm going to say 1.
You're close. They only put out 2 albums in the 70s. Yeah. Can you believe it? They put out Deja Vu, and then they put out the one when they're on the boat and on the cover in like 76 7 or something like that.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
Everything in between was a greatest hits, a live album, and they took extended breaks. You would think that, like, you think Crosby, Stills, and Nash. It's like you think like rock and roll royalty, not very prolific.
Yeah. Wow.
Right? And it blew me away when I'm looking at the discography. I'm like, wait, their first album came out in 69. Deja Vu came out in 70. And then nothing till like 76.
Mm-hmm. Which didn't really, I don't think did very well.
Yeah, it had that song Dark Star on it, which was kind of a interesting.
Yeah, I think the 82 album did extremely well.
Yeah, Daylight Again.
I guess they're kind of like the Grateful Dead. You know, they're more of a live act, I guess, you know?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean,
they were taking breaks too.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, they would break up. They broke up after this album. They kind of broke up for a little bit. They regrouped in 74. They did a live tour. They put out a live album. They put out a greatest hits.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so yeah, I always thought, wow, there's some, there's probably a lot of misses in there, and some of the discography. But I was like, there is no discography. It's like there's nothing here. It's like you listen to this album, you've listened to half of the shit they've done in the 70s. You're halfway there.
Well, there you go. That's the reason I only had the greatest hits, because you're just looking at this is it's all you need, really.
That's pretty much all their stuff.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It was amazing. So, all right, let's get into the album now. We talked a little bit about it. Rob just mentioned the Grateful Dead. So let's use that as the segue. Jerry Garcia guests on this album. He plays some slide guitar on Teach Your Children. And he said he was kind of still learning slide guitar. So he actually kind of patchworked all those little parts together. He didn't do it like all at once because he was still kind of figuring out that he kind of knew a little bit about it, but
it's an amazing sound the way it opens with that steel pedal. It's fantastic. And I think the song itself, when Nash originally did it, it was supposed to be sort of a much more folky, very, very British, which the band, Stephen Stills said, no, let's do this as a sort of a country song.
Yeah.
And kind of change the tempo and all that, because it was very, very stoic and very. I think he even had. I think he had to envision a chorus of children or like singers, like
thank God
your children. Like it was supposed to be very, very
We Are the Worldish.
I think that's what he had in mind, and then Stephen Stills like, no, let's just do this.
Put the kibosh on that.
That's right.
He wrote that while he was still in the Hollies. Absolutely. Let's kind of go. I there's not a lot on here, so I think we can kind of talk about most of the tracks. And it opens with Carry On, which really, again, another just like the vocal performances on this. It's easy to dismiss Crosby, Stills, and Nash, for their vocal prowess, but when you sit down and listen to this album and you get it like song after song, and you get different types of ways that they use their vocals, and it's not always just all them singing together. Carry On just kind of really just opens up the album, and it opens with all of them just like a very forceful, not a sedate trio of voices, but really a very forceful, kind of in your face. They get the acoustic guitar is just kind of really kind of hitting it along, and then they just really the song just opens up.
Carry On. It's one of my favorite songs. Not even on the album. Favorite songs, period. And as a guitar player, he's using some like open E tuning and everything on that and everything. And as a huge Led Zeppelin fan, that song influenced Led Zeppelin on their Led Zeppelin 3 album. Oh. If you listen to Carry On and the song Friends, it's almost exactly the same.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, that Carry On has their best harmony vocals out of any of their songs, I think.
Yeah. On this album, I'd put Deja Vu, and I'd put the song Deja Vu in there too, because they're literally going through like vocal exercises. They're singing so fast together on Deja Vu. They're just kind of really like weaving in and out. But yeah, I love Carry On. It's just so they're really singing. They're not like kind of singing gentle backing vocal style stuff like Teach Your Children. It's really very forceful.
Very forceful. Even the guitars are. I mean, it's even, you never would have thought that an acoustic guitar could be so fucking intimidating. It's the way it starts. I mean, it's very like, it's almost like I had three guitars going at once. Are they all playing the guitar? I think so. I mean, or at least maybe double tracking going on there, but I don't know. But it's amazing. It's a really good case for how an acoustic guitar can be so formidable. And like Rob mentioned with Led Zeppelin, that's a lot of Jimmy Page. I think he picked up on that. Because I mean, the songs. I mean, you could do so many different things with acoustic guitar. You could still have that fluidity. But it's just, but there's so much you can get out of it. I mean, and with electric guitar, there's effects, there's things that you can do to kind of cheat, the sound and changes, whatever. Acoustic guitar, you really can't do that. It's very,
you got to bring it.
And if you have that skill, man, it's, I love it.
And then it's got that great breakdown in the middle of the song also, which all of a sudden you get like these kind of bongos or this other kind of beat going. It kind of changes kind of changes tempo and really just a really strong start. We talked about Teach Your Children. Then you get Almost Cut My Hair, which is just like, again, and that was the thing about Stephen Stills said this about Neil Young. He goes, Neil Young wanted to be in a folk band, but we're like a rock band. Stephen Stills was looking at Crosby, Stills, and Nash as a rock band with folk leanings, and he thought that he was thinking Neil Young's approach was folk band with rock leanings. And if you go with Carry On, you look at Carry On, and you look at Almost Cut My Hair. It's like, that is, Almost Cut My Hair is the furthest thing from a folk sound.
Yeah, it's a straight up rock track. I mean,
you know what it is? You know what it is, Eric? It almost sounds like a protest song the way it's being sung. Like the way his vocal is, almost sounds like he's like protesting against the war, and maybe there's almost like it kind of got that feel, like the way the urgency of the vocal is. And I dig it. It's Crosby, but I like it. I'm changing my mind.
I love it. I mean, he it's very, and his voice is very naked too. It had to have been recorded live because there's no double tracking of vocal there. I mean, it's just straight up. I mean, it's coming, like I said, coming from the diaphragm. He's really, really projecting that track. And I love the blistering guitars in it. That again, that could be a straight up case for what grunge would sound like. Later, much later on, but
even a little punk. It's got a little, kind of a little punk in its rawness.
Yeah,
and its ferocity.
Stephen Stills and Neil Young, they have great chemistry when they play together. Their guitar licks back and forth and everything. It's great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then Neil Young shows up for the first time with Helpless, which my introduction to this song was The Last Waltz. That was the first time I ever heard Helpless. Was The Last Waltz when he comes out and he's getting his guitar. He's like, we got it now, Robbie.
Yeah.
and then he goes into Helpless and
it's an amazing track. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, it's Neil Young is a chameleon as well. He could do this tender stuff and Harvest Moon and such tender songs, but then he's got that whole other Jekyll and Hyde personality, like Eric said.
And God, his voice. How many bands that are we into right now, Dean, that emulate that voice, like Lord Huron and My Morning Jacket, and these sort of folky kind of, but weirdly rock. They're doing like such bizarre stuff, like Wilco and. But yeah, it all stems from, I think, Neil Young. I mean, it has to. I mean, he's like such an influence on that,
Yeah.
But yeah. No
it's
doubt.
just that one. And then of course you got Woodstock, written by Joni Mitchell, who was Graham Nash's girlfriend at the time.
Yeah.
And they were an item. Stephen Stills was going out with Judy Collins and they had actually just broken up, which is what the song Sweet Judy Blue Eyes was about in their previous album. But Nash and Joni Mitchell were an item, and she wrote this, and she had done it on one of her albums, and there was a couple of other bands that had covered it, but none of them sounded like this.
No,
this was the heart. Stephen Stills really took this piece of music and made it into another anthem of the times. You know, it really, you know, these are anthemic. This and you know, some of the other stuff is just these are anthemic songs for that counterculture hippie era. You know, and it's just good. The vocals on this are gorgeous as well. You know, with the soaring. You know, you can hear Graham Nash in the back, really kind of soaring up there. And he really took a song from someone else and really made it something special.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely prefer the Crosby, Stills, and Nash version to the Joni Mitchell. I mean, I've listened to them both.
Yeah.
I mean, Joni Mitchell has a great voice and everything, but nothing compares to it doesn't compare to the Crosby, Stills, and Nash version.
Now, there are some demos out there with someone very special playing bass. Jimi Hendrix was involved in the creation of this song early on. In 1969, there are demos with Jimmy playing bass and actually playing a little guitar. And I think Stills or someone said, yeah, it sounds like what you would expect if Jimi Hendrix was in Crosby, Stills, and Nash.
Yeah.
So the demos are out there. I'm glad they were friends and pals, but yeah, I don't think, it didn't need to go that experimental, but yeah, he was involved and kind of there and, helping out. So it's kind of interesting. All this, you don't really hear too much about that kind of stuff. We hear about that now with different artists, and we've talked about a lot about it recently. Different artists playing on different albums and whatnot. But here you got Jerry Garcia, you got John Sebastian is actually on this from Love and Spoonful, and then you had Hendrix, oddly enough, like in the demo phase, kind of helping out. Weird, because you always think of Hendrix as a man unto himself, like an island. You know, like the Jimi Hendrix, like Hendrix is a man alone. Kind of a singular icon, but him like coming in and playing bass, it's like,
yeah,
all right,
it's odd.
Yeah,
very odd indeed.
Yeah,
yeah,
kind of wild.
I like the fact that we didn't really mention this, but I love the title. It does feature Dallas Taylor and Greg, Jerry Reeves. I mean, the fact that they're actually credited on the title of the album, I think is fantastic too. Yeah, because they bring a lot of the great rhythm.
Yeah,
too. They really like kind of bottom it out and make it make it what it is, and it's really nice of them to put their names on the cover and yeah. And
on the cover, they're in a little bit smaller font, but they're on the cover. They're there. They're on the cover.
They're there nonetheless. I mean, they could have just been.
Yeah, and in true Crosby, Stills, and Nash in young fashion, Dallas, Reeves would get fired first. They kicked him out. He's getting too wild. He's playing stuff on the bass that is not even matching what we're doing. He's like out there. And then they would fire Dallas Taylor, I think, because he was fooling around with Stills' wife or someone's wife. So they start cutting people away. Like they don't, such a soap opera, such a soap opera. But yeah, it's great. It was almost like a full band there. Like you said, Eric, they gave those guys credit because they were important. They were integral to the sound of what was going on. And they play, that was almost like their backing section. For the whole thing, they didn't use a whole bunch of other studio musicians for
this. Actually, to me, is a bit more akin to we mentioned Cream, but to me, it's much more akin to like a Delaney and Bonnie thing, or Derek and the Dominoes. But having this sort of anonymous band. I mean, even though the names are mentioned, it's like, but you still have a full, like you say, a full on band, rhythm section that's just really, really great. And but yeah, I mean, even the cover like reminds me of like there's several pictures of Eric and the Dominoes just sort of just laying back and it's just very much of its time. It's just these bands like this, they grew and they're big, and I love that. I love that stuff. It's just fantastic. Yep.
Yeah, it really, and I think Stills is wearing like almost like an army outfit on there.
I think it's a Confederate jersey.
Yeah, and it was kind of like, they were kind of like, why did you do that? He's like, well, the revolution is coming. Like it's that was still that societal turmoil was going on. He's like, we're in the fight. So it was a little symbolism there.
And the dog on the cover looks like my dog.
Oh yeah,
he looks a lot like Brody. Yeah.
Let me see.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, right in the front. front and center too. He's like right in the middle.
Yeah.
And then our house was written by Nash, and that was literally a literal event that happened with Joni Mitchell. They were driving around. They passed a little antique shop. She saw a vase in the shop. She went in and bought it. They got into the house, and he said, "I'll light the fire, and you go put the flowers in the vase that you bought." It was literally a slice of life song about him and Joni Mitchell, about something that happened. It's kind of like, I watched an interview with him explaining it, and it's kind of like, that's pretty wild. Literally a day out, and it's just kind of like, I'll light the fire.
Inspires you to sit down and
it's like, that's a lyric. It's like, okay,
I have to confess.
Go ahead. You hate it.
It's the one song on the album I don't like. To me, it sounds too much like a Home Depot commercial or something.
Well, it's because they used it in Home Depot, Robert. It wasn't his fault. He got the song first.
I've also read in an article where Graham Nash said he sort of doesn't like the song anymore, and he only plays it because people ask for it.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it's the one song on this album that sort of doesn't really fit.
Yeah,
like
it's very sing-songy. It's kind of like like that kind of, but it's a simple melody. I mean, that's the whole beauty of it too. It's just you're getting all these different textures on the album, so there's room for this. Is almost like the When I'm 64 of Sgt. Pepper. Yeah. It's kind of very much in that playful, nostalgic feel to it. But it fits in with
it's going for. It
fits in with the rest of just like When I'm 64.
And it's the song like the critics were targeting.
Yeah.
When this album did not get a perfect score every time, there were this. It's one of the songs. It's like it's too clean. It's too it's too
and
sort
poppy.
of like
and the second half of the song, I think he got lazy with the lyrics. It's all la la la
la la. Yeah, that's where it loses me right there. It's It's
it was just about lighting the fire and putting the flowers in. That's why
the thing of it is, but by the end of that song, you think about the possibilities. If they had worked on it further, there could have been some amazing harmonies happening there. But they just choose to do the la. I hate la la las. In any kind of harmony song, I don't know what it is. It's just very bubblegum, very sort of la la like.
I guess you hate the Banana Splits theme then.
Well, yeah.
La 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 la.
But like the Beatles did it too. I mean, they in anytime somebody just literally spells the word la, or it's just
obla-dee, obla-da.
I don't know. It just it's like it's cringy.
Yeah, and it became a commercial, like prime real estate for a home improvement commercials or credit card or mortgages. You're buying your first house, and they would maybe it probably got overexposed that way. It might have been better as an understated song from the album. It might have done better if it was less popular.
Well, I would argue that it's just it would make a nice piano ballad, just one person singing, or him singing the song on the piano, just one vocal, just very simple. I think it would be nice and elegant that way. I'm sure he probably did it at some point like that, or somebody did. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's
you know what
it starts off really nice, and it does have that warm, nostalgic feel. It does take me back to I guess when I was a kid, when you used to hear it on the radio, but that's about as far as it goes. It doesn't.
Do you think he was intimidated because he's dating Joni Mitchell, and he's like, I gotta finish trying to finish this song. I mean, she's pretty formidable, and he got scared. He's like, let's do La La's at the end.
Why she didn't contribute to the song is beyond me. Since it's
probably like, this thing's a turd in a box. I'm not gonna. I don't want any part. I wrote Woodstock. I didn't write Art House. So I wrote a song that had a storyline. It had a lot of deep thoughts. I didn't write like lighting a fire and putting flowers in the box,
Superstar Graham Nash.
Joni, I don't think this is working anymore. She was too formidable. Right after that, I mean, you get to On side 2, you got the song Deja Vu, which is great. We talked about Our House. 4+20, which was done. That was done in one take by Stephen Stills, just him and the guitar. He had said to the other band members, like, "Hey, do you guys want to put some stuff on?" And Crosby's like, "Are you sick?" He goes, "It's perfect. Don't touch this. It's just him and the guitar. It's about a guy going through life, aging." Almost like something that Neil Young would visit with Old Man, kind of the same type of thing of aging and going through life. And it's just Stills and his guitar. And again, just some great tender stuff, not too funky, just more of a kind of a ballady, I guess, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a great song. I love that song.
Yeah. Very, very interesting stuff. The thing that blew me away on this album, the song that blew me away is Country Girl. Eric, do you know why?
I don't. Why?
As soon as I heard this song, I said, "This sounds like Pet Sounds." It sounds like a song that was from the Pet Sounds sessions with the drums like do-do-do-do-doom. It sounds like Let's Go Away for a While. It has the same, and it has almost a wall of sound production. And I said, "Oh my God, this sounds like a lost backing track from Pet Sounds." You have to go back and listen to it again.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
And then absolutely. I read stuff. Then I went and read stuff about it. And like, oh yeah, he's imitating a Phil Spector thing. I'm like, no, this is actually more Pet Sounds. Wow. It's a wall of sound kind of production with the drum, with kind of the kettle drums. As soon as I heard it, I was like, oh my God, I almost got chills. I'm like, this sounds like the stuff that Brian was doing, like the music, not the vocal stuff, but the musical backing tracks that Brian Wilson was working on during Pet Sounds. And it actually absolutely, I was like, holy shit, like someone heard that, and carried it forward, 4 years later.
I'll have to listen to Pet Sounds again and compare it. Yeah.
It's specifically the song Let's Go Away for a While, which is an instrumental. And it's got horns. It's a very like sedate instrumental. It's got some horns in it and some like xylophone, some really light stuff. But then it's got these like kettle or timpani drums. The same kind of fills that they're using, and it's got that wall of sound feel on it. The production from Neil Young. So it just blew me. I'm like, wow, like this, like how did I not ever hear this song before? So for me, it was kind of like that. Just kind of. That kind of capped it off. I'm like, I besides all the stuff that I knew and all the great stuff, I was like, here's this like gem of a song that I was able to like in my mind. I'm like, I as soon as I heard, I'm like, wow. I was like, wait a second, what is this? Amazing.
It's always nice when there's a that deep cut that you love, that that you just instinctively to go to. That's what puts the album over the top for you. It's the one you want to. Yeah, I felt that way about Tusk, when it came out. There was just so many songs on that record that were not rumors, that were not, so polished. And yet, it's those little gems that you favor. And it's like, this is the one, this is it, Yeah. So it's not always going to be the most popular, but that's a great story.
I was gobsmacked. I was like, holy shit. Like I was not prepared to hear something like that. And it totally caught me off guard. And I'm like, oh my God, like, holy, I could not believe it. And then of course the album closes out with Everybody I Love You, which is just a little short thing. It's kind of like a farewell song, which is really great. Like I said, this album is 36 minutes. So there's no reason for anybody not to listen to this. Right, Rob? I mean, it's like, come on.
Yeah. No, I mean, it is a quick listen and it keeps you entertained the whole way through, You're not fast forwarding through any parts.
Yeah, I mean, at 36 minutes, I'm going to say pound for pound, you're getting like a tapestry. Not to quote, Carole King of the same year, but you're literally getting a tapestry of different types of music. And it, again, for someone that like me, that was a casual listener of Crosby, Stills and Nash, you think you get the impression that it's one thing, that it is Our House, and that it is Teach Your Children, and it is those kind of vocal performances, but on this album, I got an education. I got a musical education for certain that I was not prepared. I thought I knew what I was going to get going into it. And I'm so happy that I got something totally different.
And I'm surprised when I was going over the album again and everything, and I started thinking of music throughout the years. I'm surprised that nobody else has ever really tapped into their type of like there has been super groups throughout the years, but no one really ever took the same approach that they did, except for if I had to guess, maybe like the Traveling Wilburys, where everybody comes in with their own ideas and they get together, and that way, and not in a group, more like individuals coming together and creating something as opposed to coming together and forming a group.
Yeah, in the
like,
case
I'm surprised.
I don't know, Rob. I think in the case of the Wilburys, I think it was much more of a unified feel, a spontaneous group thing that they just, it wasn't so much, oh, I got an idea, we're going to do this one song and that kind of. It might have been maybe on a couple of the tracks, but I think in that case it was much more of a brotherhood coming together. And with Crosby, Stills, and Nash, I mean, I don't know if that was the case. I mean, it's like a dictatorship with Steven.
I'm just surprised though that you don't have more like solo artists collaborating together like that.
Yeah.
In a way, it makes it almost easier because you don't have to come out with a full album worth of songs. You come in as a collaborator with somebody. You just got to give them like 2 or 3 songs, and
that's a really good point. Yeah.
And that was the whole, like you had said. Oh, sorry, Eric. Go ahead.
No, I'm finished. Go ahead.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, that like you had said, they by having each, instead of naming themselves a group, because they all had solo careers, they all had solo contracts. Neil Young was already a solo artist before this, so he had nothing to lose. He's kind of like Joe Walsh in the Eagles. He had a career before, he had a career during, and he had a career after. So you kind of make a good point, but it's just so odd that this band was just. And that was what Graham Nash got so angry about. He goes, I'm so pissed off at the wasted time that we spent waiting around to do stuff, or waiting for this one or waiting for that one. And you look at it, two albums in the 70s in an era where artists would put out minimum an album per year was the expectation. Sometimes they put out 2 if they were really prolific. Like we always talk about, like back then it was like boom, 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 boom. Like you were knocking them out because that was your contract. These guys, they do one, they fight, they break up, then they go do a live album, then they put out a greatest hits album, then they put out
Crosby
another
gets
album.
Arrested.
Yeah.
He gets hauled off to jail. And you got to wait for him to get out of jail.
It's crazy.
How many times they try to bail him out, I wonder.
Yeah. And he just spiraled out of control because during the making of this album, he said, thank God for this album, because his girlfriend had gotten killed. In a car crash. So that's when he started to really spiral and just kind of goes, I was losing it. So thank God, at least we had this to kind of come to. So they were all having relationship issues, Nash with Mitchell, and like I said, Steven Stills had just broken up with Judy Collins.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think after this album came out, they didn't tour for it for like 2 years after it or something like that.
Yeah, they didn't really promote it because they kind of imploded. They were kind of like, ugh. And Neil Young went off, and he did after the Gold Rush, I think, came out right after this, or Harvest. It was one of those two. He just went back to being Neil Young, and then in 1974, they're like, okay, let's go out. And then that's when the live album came out, and then they put out, which was called 4-Way Street. And then they put out So Far, which was the greatest hits. And then Neil Young left, not to be heard of again until 1989 or 1990. And then they just kind of, they were more prolific in the 90s than they were during their heyday, which is weird.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know why I'm so focused in on that. It's just so strange to me.
Yeah.
That they're in the pantheon of music. Even the Beatles in 10 years, they put out like, 8 or 9, 10 albums. They kind of have a body of work, And by the time Crosby, Stills, and Nash became prolific, their best years were behind, meaning their prime years were behind them of making that music. It's just so odd. And it's not like each one of them had individual, like Steven Stills had Love the One You're With. He had like a couple of minor hits, but I don't remember ever hearing, here's the new David Crosby single, or here's the newest from Graham Nash. Like they made albums and they teamed up. There was like a Crosby and Nash.
It was by reputation. Those names, like if they appeared on a talk show or, that was the thing. It's like, but
they didn't do anything. Though.
Automatically love them because of what that 1-2 album, 1-2 punch
wild.
of the first.
Yeah. So wild because it's not like they put out the 2 albums and then broke up and were never heard from again, or like Nirvana, there was a tragedy and this is all you have, right? Mm-hmm. Like they continued to tour and they continued to do stuff. They just, I don't know if they ran out of gas creatively or couldn't get.
I personally, I think it was just the clash of egos.
Yeah,
sometimes you just can't. You could make beautiful. You could play beautiful music together, but it doesn't necessarily mean you. When it comes to sitting down and actually creating something, that's where it gets a little tricky. I think, as far as, and it's a shame too, because I would love to see a band like this work that way and build an album from the ground up together. That you don't see that very often. With bands like this. Even Fleetwood Mac. It's like everybody's doing their own thing and they just get together. When the song is finished and written, and then they just we'll lay the vocals down and this blah blah blah, and that's the end of it. I think Rumors was probably the last album.
So much dysfunction happened. Yeah, like you said, there's so much dysfunction that sometimes that's the only way to work.
Yeah,
and we've seen it far and wide with these bands.
That's right.
Someone will come in and they'll lay their vocals down, and then they'll leave, and someone else will come in, and it's too bad, but. This was an eye opener. This album, I'm so happy, that I kind of went out there and be like, let's do Deja Vu. It's an album, it's a classic album. It's something we should do. We haven't done anything in the 70s for a while, Eric. We've been living in the 80s for a while, so I'm like, let's kind of mix it up. And then I'm like, let's do this. It's kind of, it's got a lot on there, but the stuff that I wasn't aware of was the stuff that blew my mind. So.
What?
And I have a little more respect for Crosby now, Eric. So I'm not hating on the Cowardly Lion as much. That was the thing that bothered me. He looked like the Cowardly Lion from Wizard of Oz. It's like Burt Lahr.
Yeah. But then, he would definitely let himself go later on. I mean, he's always got that girth, that big, belly, and even I think I just watched they did Southern Cross on the Tonight Show. I just watched it today on YouTube in prep. And it's just the 3 of them. It's not, Neil Young is not with them. But it's just the 3 of them. All 3 are playing acoustic guitar, and it's fast, and it's amazing. And they did it one take. They just performed it, and it was perfect.
Yeah.
So I've seen footage of them in the 70s, and they, there's some footage of where they, the harmonies aren't quite there. They're just, you could hear David Crosby, like the separation,
pick a key, any key.
They weren't like, a lot of times they would just kind of fly off. And
I remember seeing, it must've been like about 10 years ago. They did some like Christmas special, and they sang, and they were horrible. I mean, it was atrocious, and it was pretty embarrassing to actually, and it's sad to see that when you know how great they really are,
Wild. And oddly enough, in some tawdry David Crosby news, when Melissa Etheridge and her partner wanted to have a child, who did they think was the perfect human specimen to be the sperm donor? None other than David Crosby was the sperm donor for their artificial insemination child. Was fucking David Crosby. I mean, I guess they're looking for a kid that could just take any drug.
Wow.
The guy wasn't like altered mutant DNA to be drug resistant because remember that? It was like it was like way back, but it was like, we want David Crosby.
Yeah.
And he did it. It's like, all right.
Oh boy.
The guys had, I mean, we just lost him earlier this year.
Yeah.
2023.
I know Phil Collins was a big fan of the guy. He collaborated with him on his But Seriously record. And, they did an amazing, him and Graham Nash both appeared on an Island, which I love. David Gilmour solo album. that's an amazing track because it sounds like Crosby, Stills, and Nash, but you have that soothing vocal from Gilmore as well. Oh, it's beautiful. That if you want a song, listen to a song that gives you chills. Listen to On an Island. Yeah.
I just saw Stephen Stills a couple of weeks ago. He was at the Vets Aid benefit concert with Joe Walsh, and Joe Walsh was the closer, and then Stephen Stills came out for 3 songs, and he sounded all right. I think he's got some hearing problems. He's got some severe hearing loss. So time has not been kind. As we wrap this up, with the death of David Crosby, that's it. There's not any, they were all Crosby was on the outs with everybody else anyway. Crosby, talked shit about Neil Young or his wife. Graham Nash wasn't too thrilled with him, not happy with him. Just all kinds of problems. So it's they left. They did leave a legacy, and anybody that's listening to this, leave here now and go listen to this on wherever you can listen to it on streaming, or if you have it. What an incredible album, right? I mean, that's all I can say. It's
anybody who's not a hippie get some of the younger folks go check out what real music sounds.
Yeah, rock and roll 101 is what we call this. This is one of those albums we call rock and roll 101. This is your education, and absolutely go check out Deja Vu from Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young from 1970. So that's going to do it for this episode of the 3324 podcast. Rob, you made it through second round. Round. He's going to want to come back in a week. He's going to want to break the record for return appearance. He's going to come back next week.
I still see that Godfather poster on the, not hung up.
It's on the floor.
What's the floor? Rob, what's the poster you have in the background there? Like, is that a kitchen back there? Like, I see something hanging in
back there.
Yeah.
Well, it's the Led Zeppelin song Remains the Same.
Okay.
And then there's a big letter R. I can't remember where I got that from. And then it's my turntable.
There you go. Okay.
Rob, thank you so much for joining us. A lot of fun. Looking forward to having you back again in the future.
I would love to. Yeah, this is great. I love doing this.
Absolutely. So much fun. And as for Eric and I, we're here each and every week bringing you new episodes. And plus there's a treasure trove, 150 plus of back catalog stuff. Yeah. We're like Columbia House. Like you get 5 episodes for a penny. We'll get 5 episodes for a penny, and then we'll send you one each month.
Yeah.
Pick the first 5 on 8-track.
Oh man, remember that? Remember those days? Oh my God, good Lord!
I did that. I only did that once, and I did it much later in life. I think when I was probably over 18, I'm like, I'm going to sign up for this thing. Then the album started fucking coming. I'm like, I don't want. It might have even been in the CD era, so I was kind of done with albums. And I'm like, what am I doing?
It took forever to cancel the damn thing. Yeah. Anyway,
if you didn't tell them no ahead of time, it was coming. you were getting DeBarge's greatest hits, no matter what. It was,
That's right.
Whatever their selection was, you were getting it. Totally different time, a totally different era, which I'm sure we'll revisit at some time. So, again, thank you, Rob, for joining us. It's been a blast,
pleasure.
And everybody, find us on Instagram and Facebook. Follow us there. If you like our episodes, give us a rating, 5 stars, 4 stars, whatever the max is. We'll certainly take it, and we'll thank you for it. So, for Rob and for Eric, this is Dean. We'll catch you on the flip side.
You've been listening to the 3324 podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 podcast and on Twitter at 3324p to join the conversation.